Morning and a very good morning to the Kingdom Builders community, and we want to welcome you in the mighty name of Jesus. To all of you that have joined us so far and those that are jumping on, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning for another Kingdom Builders podcast. It is going to be an incredible conversation today, and I'm excited. I feel very privileged to be seated here on set this morning, and so I just want to make sure that you feel very warm and very welcomed wherever it is that you're watching from this morning. Would you go ahead and just drop a comment in that comment section or in the chat on Zoom this morning? Let us know where you're connected from. Let us know that you're watching, and I know that this is going to be a very profitable time as we get into just this conversation, and I'm very, very excited. I'm very privileged because I'm seated next to my father this morning. So Dad, I don't know if I'm supposed to welcome you or you're supposed to welcome me, because I feel like though you are the guest, I'm technically the guest, but good morning, Dad.
Yeah, good. Hi, Niall, and welcome.
Thank
to
you.
the
Yeah,
set.
I feel very privileged.
But actually, you are the host.
There we go.
You're going to run the show this morning.
Indeed. But Dad, thank you so much for joining us again. And I know that we're going to get into some incredible content this morning that I believe is going to be very, very valuable to those that are joining. So I also want to just quickly greet. I see Claire is on with us this morning. Daniel, welcome. Denise, thank you so much for being connected as well. Enrico, good morning. Who else do we have? We've got Esther that's connected. Pastor Brad Tabor is watching. I must make sure that I greet my wife as well. Good morning, Pastor Taylor. Thank you so much for jumping on with us this morning as well. Lungile is connected. Thank you so much, Lungile. Rian, good morning, my friend. Thank you so much for being connected. What a privilege we have to be connected with all of the Kingdom Builders family.
Amen.
And I don't want to waste too much time. I really want to get into the content for this morning. And we want to encourage you, if you do have questions this morning, use that chat or the comment section, whatever you want to call it, as the place where you can ask questions, because near the end of the time this morning, we'll circle back and try and take as many questions as possible. But we want to encourage you to please make sure that you have liked us on all of the social media platforms, Kingdom Builders. Please make sure you're following us on Instagram. And then as well, if you haven't yet purchased your Kingdom Builders ticket for the Kingdom Builders Luncheon during Revival 26, please make sure that you jump onto the My Faith TV website, myfaith.tv, onto that website and purchase your Kingdom Builders luncheon ticket before it is eternally too late. All right? Make sure that you're going to be a part of that. It's going to be a great fellowship time with all of the Kingdom Builders as we connect, and it's going to be a great blessing. Roshan, thank you so much for joining us, my friend. I'm very excited to have you connected with us today. Dad, we're going to be kind of speaking into a different lane today, which I believe is going to be very profitable. What are we going to be talking about this morning?
We're going to be talking about the choice between paying off your bond and putting money into savings.
Okay.
And I think most people in the street, grapple with this. We're going to talk about why you grapple with it, why you should grapple, why you shouldn't grapple with it, but the fact is it's a decision we've got to make.
I think it's a very important decision as well, and an important discussion because of the times that we're living in as well right now. Things around us seem quite overwhelming. Many of you, if not all of you, in some form of business, and I think these are very important conversations for us to have. So let me ask you this question, and then I want to give it over to you, and we'll just take it from there. Why is this discussion so important?
Well, it's important, number one, because if you're worrying about paying off a bond as opposed to putting money in savings, it means you're probably in debt. That's issue number one.
Yeah.
So we'll circle back to that.
For sure.
Okay. And then the question is, given that you're in that situation, what is the more profitable decision?
Yeah.
And I think as stewards of your own finances, this is a critically important thing. So. And we're going to see what starts as a simple discussion maybe isn't.
Is it?
Yes.
I'm very, very excited.
So it might get a little bit complicated. But let me maybe start by making a few statements. Just from a biblical perspective, if I may.
Go for it.
I like to start from there.
Go for it.
Proverbs 10:5 says, "He who gathers in the summer is a wise son." That's saving. That's a wise son. But he who sleeps in the harvest is a son who causes shame.
Sure.
That's pretty heavy.
That's pretty straight.
That's pretty straight. Proverbs 1:3, though, also says, "Receive instruction in wise dealing."
Oh, wow.
And this is one that is guided me for many years. You make wise decisions, you make unwise decisions, and you learn from the unwise decisions. Okay. But also receive instruction in wise thoughtfulness. How you approach this, and I want to say this as a maybe an overarching principle, the way God operates. He responds to management.
It's true. Yes.
He responds to stewardship.
Yes.
If you can't look after the little, he's not going to give you the much.
Come on.
Right? And that's a principle that applies to everything, not only money, it applies to everything in your life. And so when we carefully steward what he provides us, then he has the capacity to give us more because it can be looked after.
Yep.
Here is the big statement for the morning. What we do not manage, we will lose.
Sure.
What we do not manage, guys, we will lose. It's just the way it is, okay? If you don't manage your money correctly, you're going to lose it.
Wow.
And we're asking God to bless us, which he already has.
Yes.
But we're losing what he's blessed us with because we're not managing it correctly.
Come on.
Okay, so we must be very careful. So now it comes to this. It comes to the question I said I'd circle back to. Why is this important? Well, you shouldn't have to make this decision if you weren't in debt. Okay, so let's just start there.
Sure.
I mean, the fact that you owe the bank money on your home is because you're in debt.
Yeah.
You use the bank's money to buy your home. Is that right or is that wrong? Well, sometimes it's the only way that you're going to be able to get into your home.
For sure.
Okay?
For sure.
So it's debt by choice.
Sure.
That's not necessarily sin unless the Lord has specifically set you on that transaction, no debt.
Convicted
okay,
you.
So and convicted you. So assuming that that's not the case, that's not sin. But now you're sitting with a situation where you owe money to the bank. Now, what happens with a bond? It's important to understand the mechanics with a bond. A bank's not going to give you, and Rion on the call will know, a bank's not going to give you money for nothing.
That's true.
Money has a price. In the Bible, it's called usury.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's interest.
Yes.
That's really what it is. And there's a thing in our lives called the prime interest rate, and currently I think it's 10.5%. Okay, now the way it gets to that amount of percentage is because the central bank of the country. This might just help people understand this a little bit better. The central bank of the country lends money to the banks, who on turn lend money to you and I, okay? But the bank has to make a profit.
Sure.
So the repurchase rate, or the rate that the central bank lends to the commercial banks, is currently about 7%.
Okay.
And normally the profit margin or the markup that the bank makes, and all banks do it unanimously and the same, it's contemporaneous, will be 3.5%. So that's how you get to 10.5%.
Wow.
Okay? So if you're in debt to the bank, you're probably paying them around 10.5%. Now, sometimes it could be more.
Sure.
That you're going to, for the example I'm going to use 10.5%, but it could be more because maybe the amount of money that you've borrowed is more risky. Maybe you didn't put a big enough deposit into the bond yourself to start, so you've borrowed more than the bank's really happy with. The bank might be a little bit edgy around your ability to repay, which means they're going to compensate for that risk by charging you a higher rate of interest, etc., etc. Also, the security that you're giving the bank might not be adequate, in which case the bank has to compensate for their risk. And I think most of us on this call understand that. That's the way it works. But I'm going to use 10.5%.
For sure.
That is what you're going to pay the bank. Now, a curious opportunity arises with this. And it shouldn't have to arise if you weren't in debt. But it does arise because given that I have to pay the bank whatever capital they've lent me, but I've got to pay them the price of that, which is 10.5% interest.
Sure.
If I can reduce the amount of that, then I'm effectively earning 10.5%.
Got you.
Will you agree?
I agree.
And there's a benefit because the 10.5% that I'm effectively earning by paying it off quicker is not taxable.
Sure.
Because it's not income.
Yes.
You're just reducing an expense.
Sure.
Okay. But it's a very important consideration, this.
Yeah, of course.
Because if I invest money in a bank, I'm going to earn interest on which I've got to pay tax.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there is this very odd kind of situation that arises where if the bond is going to cost me 10.5%. By paying it off quicker, I'm saving 10.5% or effectively earning it tax-free. And I've got to compare that against what I can earn in the bank.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the basic principle for today that we're talking about.
Great.
Right. So if I'm going to put it into, there are different investments that I can put my money into. But if we just start with putting cash in the bank, okay, which we all know is digital anyway.
Yes.
I mean, even if they rob the bank, what they're going to rob? There's no cash. It's just digital anyway. It's noughts and ones. But if I put that in the bank currently, and if I invested it over, say, 12 months on a fixed deposit, I might be able to achieve 7 or 8%. Okay, let's just use 7%. That means, in a very simple discussion, if I paid my bond off quicker, I'm going to save 10.5%. If I put it in the bank, I'm going to earn 7%.
Yeah.
Okay, which means the opportunity cost of doing that, of not paying the bond off quicker, is 3.5%.
Yeah.
So on a pure arithmetic discussion now, I mean, duh, surely I must just pay off the bond.
For sure.
But that isn't the end of the story. Okay, that definitely isn't the end of the story. So if we just try and do a simple calculation here, okay, and if we do that, we're going to be saving the 3.5%. But what happens if I've got to pay tax on that 7%? If I've got to pay tax on that 7%, then that 3.5% could become a lot more.
A lot more, yeah.
But before we concede on that, let's just work out, and I'm not talking about investments at the moment that have capital appreciation. I'm just talking about putting cash in the bank.
Yeah.
Okay? How much can I have in the bank before I have to pay any tax at all? And this is what a lot of people miss now, because a lot of people are scared to put money in the bank because they're worried about paying tax on interest, which is a little silly.
Yeah.
And I'll show you why. If you're going to earn 7% on money that you put in the bank, currently what our taxing system does is it allows us to earn up to 23,800 Rand each a year before we pay any tax in interest. So if we work out at 7%, what is 23,800 Rand at 7%? It's about 340,000 Rand, which means mom and dad can have 340,000 Rand each in the bank before they pay 1 cent of tax.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that if we are having to have money saved, it doesn't mean that you've got to rather pay it off your bond because if I save it, I'm going to pay tax.
For sure.
You're not going to.
For sure.
It means mom and dad can have up to 680,000 Rand in the bank before
Without
they
tax.
even start thinking about paying tax,
Got you.
which is really, really good.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, of course, that a few years ago, our taxing system introduced the notion that you can have tax-free investments as well. And I know this starts to get a little bit complicated, but I'm afraid that's the life that we live in.
Yeah, it's important.
It's important. So you can currently put in about 46,000 Rand into tax-free investments a year. What that means is that doesn't matter how big that grows, when you take the money out, you're not going to pay tax on that.
Sure.
But there's a lifetime cap on that of about 500,000 Rand. Okay. So let's say you are 20 years old and you put 46,000 Rand a year out of your after-tax money from your salary into a tax-free savings account or tax-free investment. And by the age of 30, that 46 has become around 500,000. Okay. 10 times 40 is 480. So 500,000.
Yeah.
And you're going to work from age 30 to age 60. You've got another 30 years growth on that 500,000.
Yeah.
That could be worth an incredible
Significant,
amount of money by the time you draw it out, and you won't pay a cent tax on that.
Wow.
So there are lots of ways, the discussion gets quite complicated because actually it's just because the bond is costing more, 10.5% right now, if I'm achieving more than 10.5% tax-free growth in a tax-free investment,
For sure.
this
That
discussion
makes sense.
doesn't even need to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Other than I just don't like debt and I want to get out of debt.
Yeah, the yoke of debt.
The yoke of debt. So obviously, I mean that's always going to be an aspect. If you don't like debt, and none of us do, anybody who likes debt maybe needs some counsel. But so there is always this thing in your mind. Let me clear my debt. Let me get out of it. I know when your mom and I got out of debt, for us, that was a party. That was a big party because that yoke is gone forever, and never to be taken up again. So the point is, you can put money in the bank and you can pay it off your bond. You pay it off your bond because you want to eliminate debt, but you also pay it off your bond because you can earn 10.5% tax-free. I'm saying to you, it's possible to earn 10.5% tax-free anyway.
Yeah.
So the two discussions have to be had at the same time.
Of course. Wow.
Okay.
Sure.
So it's quite important to understand that. However, if you are in a situation where you are going to be exposed to tax on the interest now, because actually you've got more than 340,000 Rand each invested in the bank.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just go down that avenue for a moment. Well, then the disparity between the 10.5% that you're going to save effectively or earn by saving, by paying off your bond, okay, is going to be a lot more than your after-tax money you're going to receive in the bank.
Sure.
Because let's say your tax rate, let's say you're going to earn 7% and your tax rate is 25%, let's just say. Then under the circumstances like that, you're actually going to earn probably 7% minus 25% tax. You're going to earn maybe 5.25%.
Yep.
Okay, 5.25% is half your saving on the bond. So obviously paying off the bond makes a lot more sense.
Sure.
So if you are going to be exposed to tax, it does make sense, probably in these circumstances, to pay money into the bond.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's quite an important thing. And I hope up to now that's kind of reasonably clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Very.
We also need to take into account that there are some reasons why you're not going to pay off all your debt at the same time, and you're going to rather keep some money stashed away for a rainy day.
Okay.
And things like that are going to be, well, maybe you're going to self-fund your medical expenses, and you don't want to pay all your money to a medical aid.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I often think when I was younger, if I'd have started doing that when I was 20, when I was 25, when I started working, my medical aid would have been self-funded pretty handsomely by now at the age of 60, nearly 64. So you may want to do that, notwithstanding that you do have some debt in your life, but you're wanting to have money stashed away. And if it's, you see what used to be possible, and I think it's got a little bit difficult to do it now, but I think you used to be able to get what you call a flexi bond, where you could just pay money into that bond and then you could draw money out the bond. Now it is still like that, but I think it has been policed a lot more now. Okay, but the problem is if you pay your money into the debt, wanting to pull it out for your medical bills, if you lose track of what you effectively saving in your bond, you start losing control of your money.
Sure.
And that's a self-discipline thing.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of us say to each other, well, we're very self-disciplined. Really?
Yeah, until it comes
you know what
down
I mean?
to it.
Yeah, I can only talk from personal experience. It's not always that simple. Okay.
Definitely.
But providing for medical expenses, you may not want to do it in your bond, where you effectively providing for medical expenses at 10.5%. You actually wanted to have it in a separate place.
Yes.
And when it comes to management of your finances, sometimes to me it's just easier to have it in a separate place because it's earmarked, it's ring-fenced, you know where it is, it's safe, and you're not going to spend it. Another one could be you need to save money for personal taxes. You know what I mean? Because you might have all sorts of other investments which accrue tax.
Yes.
Okay. Your holiday savings. And listen, one of the things you got to do in your life is save for holiday.
Definitely.
You got to have a break with your
In
family.
Jesus' name.
Absolutely. I'm at the front of that queue. But it's something you've got to do.
Yes.
It's a very, very important thing. So it will lose its identity if it's invested in the bond. Sometimes it needs to be in another place. Another one could be provision for repairs on your home, provision for servicing. I don't know when last you took a motor vehicle for servicing. Okay, provision for that.
For sure.
Basically, you've got to have cash, man.
Yes.
You've got to have cash.
Yes.
There's another thing which you must also realize too, and that is it costs money to die.
Sure.
And that money that it costs to die, not only the cost to bury you, and I always say, put me in a cheap casket. I don't need a fancy casket. But the point is, you've got to pay estate duty.
Yes.
Now, if you are invested in property and if you have wealth, and certainly wealth above 3.5 million, or as a couple above 7.5 million, you're going to pay 20% estate duty, okay? Where does that money come from?
Yeah.
So in your life, you can provide for it as insurance policies or whatever, or you can have it in cash, but it's got to be there so that when you die, your heirs and your executors have got the access to the cash to basically pay the death taxes. Okay, so it's quite important. So putting everything into getting rid of debt sometimes has a cost to it, and one has to be very careful about those type of things. It is also possible for us to put money into investments that are not necessarily going to generate interest.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a good example. You could put money into unit trusts. Now, unit trusts are the benefit of unit trusts is that you might not have enough cash to buy particular individual shares in the stock market, for example. So by putting an amount of money every month into unit trusts, what these fund managers do is they take your money and they spread it across a whole lot of companies.
Yes.
So eventually you become invested in all sorts of
areas,
companies, which is a phenomenal system. It really is. And provided you go into the right ones, they can actually generate a very good return for you. Now, there might be some interest that effectively accrues from that to you, but it's generally going to be pretty low. But it's mainly going to be capital growth because that's what you're going in for.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to pay tax on that now. You're going to pay tax on that when you realize it. But the point is those investments can grow, and they can grow in excess of the 10.5% you're paying the bank.
Sure.
Okay. And I want to give you an example of that because let's just take a theoretical example. If I had 100,000 Rand which I was going to invest in the bond to reduce the 10.5% and effectively earn it. So now I need to look at what can I earn after tax in excess of that 10.5%. Because for it to be competitive.
Sure.
Well, I could buy a listed share or a few listed shares. Let's say I bought a suite of listed shares myself. I didn't go into unit trusts. I bought a suite of listed shares myself. And it grew at 15% a year over 3 years. Now, generally what happens with shares, if I own them for more than 3 years, you're probably going to find that when you sell them, they're going to be subject to capital gains tax, not normal income tax, because I've held them for 3 years. So that can get complicated, that discussion, but let's just assume that for now. Well, effectively, at a 15% growth per year, it means that those 100,000 has become worth 152,000 at the end of 3 years. Well, it's a 52% return over 3 years, which is around about a 17% return per year, which is pretty good.
That is.
And if I calculate that and I actually sell them at that particular point in time, do you know that on that, my capital gains tax would be 208 Rand?
Sure.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that is.
So actually, after tax, I've generated around about a 17% return, which far outweighs 10.5%.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason I would avoid doing that is because I just have I need to get out of debt.
Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes.
And I understand that. And in fact, I support that.
Sure.
You know, you have to support a thinking like that. But it is possible, and this is important, if you know what you're doing, it is possible to earn a return after tax that can exceed that 10.5%.
Yes, of course.
It's not just simply, hey, I can only get 7% in the bank,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, over, say, 12 months. And I should rather pay off the bond because the 7% is 3.5% less than 10.5%. So this is not a straightforward, simple discussion.
Got you.
There are a few things we need to take into account. And then the last other example, and I know today's maybe not going to be as long a session, but the other example I want to look at is, okay, so I've got a house and I had a bond on that house. It's costing me 10.5%. But what I might want to do is, instead of taking my 100,000 Rand and putting it into cash investments, unit trusts or listed shares, or buying gold or whatever, I want to go and buy another property.
Yes.
And I want to go and buy an investment property. Now, you know, debt is people say, yes, you have good debt and you have bad debt. Now, I think you just have bad debt.
Yeah.
Bad debt, no debt's good.
Yeah.
But there is a little bit of ointment.
Sure.
Okay, and that is, if you do invest in an investment property, it's going to generate a rental, hopefully, provided the person doesn't squat and does pay you, and it'll pay most, if not all, your expenses, and if not all, yes, you'll have to pay in, but you've got capital growth on that investment. Sure. So it is possible, in fact, on your investment property, for you to earn, you know, an appreciable capital return. Your return on investment on the 100,000 you've put in, let's say you borrowed, I don't know, 500 from the bank, you put 100 in and you bought a flat or something like that. You've got an appreciation in the value of the property, but it does have a bond.
Yes.
Well, I would probably want to pay off my home bond first.
Of course.
Than the one on the investment property.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because the one on the investment property at least is tax deductible.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not having to pay tax on all my rental because I can deduct some expenses from it, including the interest. Whereas on a home bond, you can't deduct your interest. Unless you're trading at home, And I'll talk about that
discussion.
last, but that is like trying to do a dance with a crocodile. Good luck to you. There are some really big issues around that. So it is possible for you in looking at this alternative. We started by saying, is it better to invest, pay off your bond or put money in savings? Well, depends what type of savings we're talking about.
Yes.
Because your savings could be unit trusts, they could be resources like gold, they could be shares, they could be things like that. It could be cash in the bank, but it also could be another investment property.
Yeah.
Okay. So the discussion needs to take all of those things into account. But certainly if I was in another investment property and I had a bond on that, I would certainly be paying off my home bond first because it's dead money.
Yeah.
You're paying your home bond out of salary after tax.
Sure.
It's dead money. It's a hard cost. So the quicker you can get rid of it, I would always support that type of thinking as a matter of principle.
Of course.
Okay. And then the last thing is, if we just go back to the situation where you don't own anything else, but you do just own your bond, your home, and you have a bond. Well, if you are trading in your home, and let's say you have a home office or a garage or something that has been demarcated specifically, can't be used for anything else, certainly interest on your bond relating to that is tax deductible against income that you show, in which case that could mitigate a little bit between the cost of putting money in savings and paying off your bond.
Yeah.
Okay. But really that discussion gets incredibly difficult because the minute you start trading from home, the minute you start making those claims, the day that you sell your property, don't think that you're going to be free from capital gains tax on a primary residence, because it clearly isn't a primary residence, it's a business residence. So you've got to, that's quite a big discussion.
Sure.
Okay, I'm oversimplifying it,
I'm with you.
but just warning sign with the exclamation marks. And that pretty much is the story, I think, for today. Niall, I think there was another question that you had to ask me.
So there's two questions that I want to ask you, first of all, and I know that there's a few of you that have already typed questions in the comment section. If you would you go ahead, if you do have a question for my dad, if you would like him just to take a moment. And we've got some time this morning, which is great. If you would like to ask a question right there on the Zoom chat, go ahead and type it in, and I'll do my best to endeavor to come around and circle back to it. But there's two questions that I want to ask. At the end of the day, does the choice between the two options not come down to your personal circumstances?
I think it absolutely does, Niall, and that is precisely the thing which I've been trying to describe to you this morning, is that everybody's circumstances are different. Everybody's disposition towards debt is different. The fact is, it doesn't matter even if it's in an investment property. You know what I mean? If you're in debt, you're a servant to the lender. You don't pay; they're coming to take it away.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what it is. And you're part of a debt covenant which you have to honor. If you don't honor it, then there's breach provisions. So it always, in all these circumstances, you have to look at everybody's individual circumstances to work out what is best. And many times in these things, it's just not an arithmetic discussion only. It's or a return on investment discussion only. Often it's an emotional element. You know, when you buy your home, that's more of an emotional decision than if you buy an investment property, which is going to be, pretty dispassionate.
Yeah, disposable.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So those circumstances have to be taken into account. Absolutely.
Third question, then we're going to come across some of the questions that have been asked on the chat. Which should I pay off quicker, the bond on my home or vehicle?
There we go. Okay. So unless you're investing in vintage cars,
they don't
appreciate. I think even if you're buying Lamborghinis, I think that they depreciate, and the first scratch will tell you that. So at the end of the day, a motor vehicle is glorified rent. To be honest, your motor vehicle should be bought cash. To be honest, as a kingdom builder, really, you should limit your exposure to debt as best you can, because it means that you're going to have more free cash available to invest in the kingdom. Okay? People get into a situation where they say, I can't tithe because of my debt. But you put yourself in that situation. Okay? And so it's quite important. So if I was going to be forced to choose which debt would I have, it would be on my home, not on my car. That's for sure.
Of course.
Because the car depreciates where your home appreciates.
Yeah.
So there's a possibility to get out of jail here.
Yes.
With a vehicle, you're not going to get out of jail here that quickly. So I would definitely say pay off the home bond or pay off the car if you've got debt on it. Get rid of that debt. Get rid of it, and then start getting rid of the debt on your home.
Yeah.
But I would definitely buy a cheaper car and buy it cash.
Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to good stewardship.
Absolutely.
And sometimes trying to live above our means, to try and portray an image that actually ends up putting us in a worse situation.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I think that, first of all, on your home, you never buy your palace the first time. You buy it maybe
That's good advice.
Yeah, you buy it the fourth time.
I like that. That's good.
Exactly. So you buy the first one and it's not cool, but it doesn't matter.
Yes,
You
exactly.
own property.
Yeah.
The world's not getting bigger.
Yeah, so property is always going to increase in value.
Exactly. So you own the first one, you sell it, you buy the second one, it appreciates, you sell it, you buy. By the time you get to the fourth, you might buy your palace.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what it is.
Maybe if I can add a comment as well. I think one of the reasons, or sometimes we get ourselves into these situations, is because we don't realize that. I think in the book of Proverbs, it teaches us that wealth is built over time as well.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we get ourselves into situations, try and
Absolutely.
generate a quick buck. In actual fact, it just puts a yoke around our neck. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's been incredible value this morning. I want to just quickly ask you, if you have any questions, go ahead and put it in the comment section. We've got one question so far. Well, I think we've got two questions.
Yeah, there's two.
Maybe even more. But the first question, what is the advantage of having to pay off your mortgage and close the account rather than to pay it and keep the account
that's a very,
open?
very good question. I would not close the account.
Yeah.
I tell you why.
We were speaking about this the other day, weren't we?
Yes.
You're able to pull that cash when you need it.
Yes, depending on the terms of the bond, but you may have access to some funds. In this life, you never really know what's going to happen. Just because you save doesn't mean that you can have some tough times.
Yeah,
okay?
of course.
The disciples were in the boat and there was a storm. They were in the perfect will of God, but they were in a storm.
Yeah, of course.
Okay?
Yeah.
So it's how you navigate the storm and what you do. So what happens just practically, though, is when I buy my house and I have a bond, when I pay that bond off down to R1, and the bank will not give you the title deed until you pay that last R1 and cancel the bond.
Yeah.
Understandably, they're holding it as security. But if you cancelled it, if you ever wanted to open up again, then you're going to have to re-register the bond and pay those fees, which is generally, besides the lawyer's fees, it's going to be about 1% of the value of the bond you want to now re-register.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it just doesn't make sense. It makes sense for you to pay it down, keep it at R1, and if you are able to access cash out of it because of an emergency, then you can. But then, doing that, you're going back into debt.
Sure.
Understand what you're doing.
Yeah, and you're going to have to then repay it.
Yes.
I'm thinking about when you're talking about the disciples in the storm, I'm really reminded of Joseph, because God told Joseph that there would be times of plenty, but as well as times of famine. And so his stewardship in the times of plenty is what enabled him to make it through the time of famine or the time of little. And he was able to, it wasn't just his situation, but actually a nation.
Well, that story absolutely fascinates me because it's one of the examples of stewardship at a level I wonder if many of us ever get to in our lives.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The godly wisdom that God gave him was absolutely incredible. And I think, if you work out 20% was his tax rate.
Yeah.
Well, 20% over 7 years is only 140%.
Yeah.
You need 700% to finance the 7 years of famine. Where did that come from? Okay, so that's God's multiplication.
Of course. And
You
God
know what I
can
mean?
bring provision and increase to a person that can steward.
Exactly.
Stewardship is the key to increase.
Exactly.
Somebody asked a question here. Oh, my Lord. My dad's favorite conversation is cryptocurrency. So somebody asked the question, is it right for a saved person to invest money in crypto instead of traditional banking, in brackets, trading?
This is going to be good.
Yeah, there we go.
That's a fantastic question. But maybe the way to answer it is this way. Crypto doesn't, just because it's cryptocurrency doesn't mean that it's any different to any other kind of Babylonian system.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I don't think that there's a distinction.
Sure.
What may so whether you're saved or not is not necessarily the issue.
Yes.
I think that is a red herring. And I hopefully that helps. But I think what is very important to understand, and I'm going to qualify this now before I start. I turned 64 this year.
There we go.
I'm too old for that.
Yeah, yet to understand what this thing is.
But here's the issue for me. And cryptocurrency, certainly, I think in our country at the moment, is unregulated.
At this moment, yeah.
At this moment. So whereas if you buy shares in a company on the stock exchange, that is highly regulated.
Yes.
And it's regulated so that it can't be manipulated.
Yes.
Who controls cryptocurrency?
Yeah. That's always the question.
That's always the question.
Who decides this?
Who? I mean, how is it that October a year and a half ago, Bitcoin was at 65,000 US dollars, and all of a sudden 5 months later was down to 25,000 US dollars. I mean, that's not like just a few percentage changes. That is a violent fluctuation. So where's the regulatory influence in that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's highly speculatory, which is okay if that's what you're into.
Yeah.
But it's a massive problem. You can make a lot of money in crypto, but you can lose a lot of money
as well. It's
Absolutely.
highly volatile.
But I will say this to you: if you are buying cryptocurrency, it's going to be very difficult to discharge the onus, the burden of proof that you are investing in it for capital gain.
Yeah.
You are speculating, which I'm telling you, understand you're going to pay income tax on your profits.
Yeah.
And with AI nowadays,
Yep.
I'm telling you, SARS are onto you.
There we go. So there's, I think we've got a few more questions that are coming in. This question, I'm not too sure if maybe the person would like to maybe just give a little bit more detail, but someone basically asked, are there any tips, especially around the topic of a credit card?
Yeah, definitely. I think if just off the top of my head, credit cards, generally speaking, finance living costs.
Sure.
And there lies the danger.
Sure.
Now, it is possible that you can use it to finance other things, but generally speaking, credit cards, personal credit cards, are used to finance private expenses. Debt should never be used to finance personal expenses because there's no return on investment other than your happiness.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue with me and say, Greg, but yes, you're contradicting yourself because you've got a debt on your house and that's financing happiness.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is true, but at least you have appreciation of the asset.
Of the property, for sure.
But you have no appreciation on the food you ate last night.
Yeah, you're going out to an expensive restaurant, spending, amounts of money and never make a return on it.
It's temporary.
Yeah.
Okay, it's temporary. And so therefore, I would definitely make sure that if you are using a credit card, use it as a debit card, which means you put the money in that you're going to spend this next month and let it, you use it during the month, or at the very least, you pay that credit card in full at the end of the month.
Yes.
Never partially.
Never allowing it to roll over to the next month.
Never, ever do that.
I mean, those would be indications of, again, living beyond your means.
Absolutely.
Living a life that you,
Absolutely. And now what happens for some people is that happens because they're living in an environment where their status depends on what they wear.
The car you drive, the clothes that you wear, the food that you're eating. I think, Dad, if I can add this comment, and then I see we've got another question. I was thinking about the truth is that when God really does increase an individual, or He promotes you in the measure of prosperity, you begin to increase. Everything around you rises to support it.
Yes.
For example, if you've bought a vehicle right now and we look at the diesel prices or the petrol prices, and you're taking your 2 million rand vehicle and you're putting 100 rand diesel in, you've probably prematurely pushed yourself into a realm that you're not ready for.
That's exactly the problem.
Everything around you is going to support that level. I mean, you buy that kind of car, but to buy one of those tires is 8 grand, but now you can't replace the tire.
So the truth is that most truly wealthy people don't flash their wealth.
Yes. I've learned that as well, being in church, ministering to people, the people that have the real wealth are the ones that don't, you would never be able to tell it.
You would never know.
Question number 4.
If you buy the things that you think you need, you're going to very soon have to sell the stuff that you actually do need.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Question number 4, we've got about 5 or so minutes left. And if you guys have received value out of this morning, please give us feedback. And if you could, tag us on Instagram @Kingdom Builders. Please do tag us. and let us know that you've been blessed this morning. Question number 4, if you have invested in property and initially started by buying it under personal name, how can one put them in a trust, and what is the best way?
Okay, so this is a complicated question.
Very.
Okay, and I'm assuming you're talking about a business property, not a home.
Yeah.
Okay. You can, but what's going to, if you create a trust and the property is in your own name, you are by definition connected persons.
Yes, to it.
Therefore, the transaction has to happen at open market value,
Yeah.
willing buyer, willing seller,
Yes.
which means depending on when you bought the property, if the market value is a lot higher than what it was when you bought it,
Yeah.
you're going to have a capital gain right
Okay.
there. So you've got to calculate that. The other one is that if you do not donate it to the trust and pay 20% donations tax, you're going to have a loan account, and then you're going to have Section 7C, which is a deemed donation for the interest that you may not charge on your loan. So there are a lot of, I can't answer the question in this type of thing, but it is possible for you to do it. But that's a very, very specific question. It's complex, that question.
I think that's what I value the space of Kingdom Builders so much, because now through Kingdom Builders we can facilitate these types of conversation. Because yet we are in a time of Babylonian systems, but if Daniel could prosper in physical Babylon, the saints can prosper in a spiritual Babylonian system, which we are in right now within the nation.
Absolutely.
And so I think that this is the value of Kingdom Builders. We want to encourage you to connect with Kingdom Builders. If you haven't checked our community out yet on WhatsApp, please do that. And the next week, Tuesday, we're going to be back to facilitate another conversation. We're excited for all that's unfolding. Let's end off with this question, Dad. You'll have about a minute to answer it.
No problem.
And I know that you've got it.
No problem.
But and I think this is also a great question, because maybe a lot of people are feeling this.
Brilliant.
So somebody asked a question: when you have already become overwhelmed by debt due to previous lack of knowledge, where do you start to correct it, and how do you save at the same time?
Okay, in a situation like this where you've been overwhelmed by debt, it's going to be very difficult to save it the first time.
Yeah.
Save at the same time.
Yeah.
You're going to have to you're going to have to agree with yourself for a period where all you're going to do is get out of debt.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's important. And then what you do is you work out how much money you've got to pay to get out of debt, and then you start allocating it between your debt payments. And when some of them get paid off, you don't now reduce that. You keep it the same amount and reallocate it to the next thing. And in this type of circumstance, for me, although it would make sense to pay off your ones that are costing you more interest earlier, sometimes I would get rid of the ones that aren't costing me interest, but I can get rid of them earlier because of the emotional success that I feel.
Yes.
Are you with me?
Exactly, for
Tick,
sure.
gone.
Yeah.
Tick, gone. Okay, but that money I'm going to put into this. So I'd pay off my credit card first. Then I'd start paying off my car first.
Okay.
That type of thing. Because at least once the credit card's gone, I feel, okay, I achieved something.
Yeah. I think there's also, this thing is spiritual as well.
Oh, yeah.
That this thing of debt is more than just a natural reality, but it's a spiritual thing.
Absolutely.
And there's weights that you feel. I mean, some of you might be able to testify of trying to feel like you're just trying to keep your head above the water.
Correct.
Some of it is by the ignorance that we made prior to coming into the kingdom.
Correct.
But I believe, that's where I believe the Lord can work with our stewardship, and He can bring supernatural intervention. So let's end off with this question, Dad, and you're going to have literally 30 seconds.
No problem.
And then I want to end. Or not I want to end, but I need to end because we respect your time. Question number 6, is it better to get into investing with a larger amount of money, or am I able to start small? If yes, how can I invest effectively with a smaller amount? This comes from one of our Bible school
No,
students.
well, this is a classic one. I mean, something like unit trusts is a fantastic
Great way to go, yes.
Because, I mean, you know, if you've got 500 Rand a month, put it into unit trusts.
Yes.
In the first year, you're not going to see a lot of growth, but after that, you are going to start seeing.
Yes.
But at least it's going into the market.
Yes.
But when you put into something like this, you must have a longer term view. So you're not going to be cashing this out. You're putting this in to grow. In other words, you forget about it.
Come on. I think, it's so important. These are great conversations for us to have. And I think what it does, cultivates the discipline as well.
Absolutely.
Cultivates the discipline and the stewardship of, I'm putting this money aside.
Absolutely.
Not for a tomorrow I'm a millionaire, but there's a long term.
No, it's a long
term. And many of this in the kingdom, it's a generational
Yeah.
thinking as well. It's not just for you, it's for your children and your children's children. We want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you so much for being connected. Please do help us to share the Kingdom Builders platform. Please continue to join us. Next week, Tuesday, we're going to be facilitating another incredible conversation, and I know it's going to be beneficial to you. So if you've been blessed, give us an emoji there. I can see some of you are hitting the heart, some of you are hitting the thumbs up. Let us know in the chat as well if you were blessed today. Dad, I want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
or thank you for joining me, even though, again, I feel like I joined you.
No.
But what a privilege to be seated here today, and the value of knowledge that is being shared. I believe that God is going to use it, and it's going to be a blessing to you in Jesus' mighty name.
Amen.
So we look forward to taking your testimonies. We'll see you again next week, Tuesday, for a Time in Kingdom Builders podcast. We love you. Have a blessed Tuesday in Jesus' name. God bless you.